move like a lot of fruit.
One of those.
You move what? It's not going to be difficult. It's only 3 minutes. Okay, so good morning.
Good morning.
What's good about it?
They're back.
We have power.
So find somebody around you, one person, look at that person, and say, good morning. Good morning. So say good morning. Say good morning. Good morning. So let's do it again. Find somebody else, but now really mean it. Like, this is not a TV show. It's like a human. So make it human. Make it more powerful. Make it more real. Okay. So find somebody else. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. How are you? Good morning. Good morning. So, thank you. Okay, so this morning I got inspired by Shelly. She was doing planks and push-ups this morning. So this is what we're going to do. So find a partner, except it may not work, so you don't have to because you have it dressed. You can just do this. So two partners. One goes into a plank. Facing my legs. So your partner crouches down, and you're going to lift one leg, and I'm going to pick up the other one. And I'm going to drop this leg, leave it up, and like that.
Wow.
3 minutes?
No. Just do that 5 times, okay? And then I'll say switch, then switch.
All right.
Okay? So try to keep your pelvis up, your core in, okay? Your bum. Okay? Okay. We're moving up to arm stand there next week, so. Okay, so. Okay, go.
Yes.
This is what 3 years ago.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. All right. So if it's not hard enough, okay, switch. If it's not hard enough, lower your foot to the floor without touching it and raise it back up. Okay? Okay. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Good job. Wakey, wakey.
That's maybe blood circulation.
So, here to introduce you.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm introducing Karen and Owen. So, it's funny how you go away for 2 weeks and you lose your job. Looking forward to your talk. So, go ahead, guys.
Thank you. And Eve, thank you for sharing Monday Facebook Live. I know you have a lot to talk about coming back from your yoga training. And you will always have a job. Don't worry there. And I also want to turn my attention to Owen and thank him for helping me out. Now, Eve has got me all out of breath from doing that exercise. So, back on October 1st, I actually did a Facebook Monday Live as well. And I made mention to Tuba, our approach to building better culture. And I talked about how, as part of our approach, we were dedicating each month to one of the behaviors needed to build better culture in the workplace. October was the month of leadership. And after Facebook Live on Monday, Owen and I had a great conversation that incorporated what resonated with us when it comes to leadership. So much so that the idea came to us that, we need to share this with everybody. So I'm going to interview Owen. I'm going to ask him a few questions. There's no better way to learn about better culture and sharing the Dovico culture than by learning about what one of its own community members is doing and to share their wisdom. So the first question, Owen, that I'm going to ask you is, where did your interest in leadership stem from?
Well, thanks. I don't know, wisdom would be the word.
Yeah.
I certainly have some insights and some opinions. I love sharing opinions. But certainly, I think leadership is an interesting topic. I mean, there's so many different angles from which you can tackle it. I've spent, I guess if I have to take a step back, I'd have to go back to 2 books, both by the same author, that I read about 10 years ago. And in those books, Simon Sinek, it was the first one that I read, was Start With Why. And in that book, it was really all about purpose and understanding your purpose. So then you could have the necessary motivation to see things through. And then shortly after that, he released another book after I'd read that called Leaders Eat Last. And that was the book that really struck a chord. And I think back to the time in which that book was written, it's about 10 years ago. And we were going through a financial crisis at that time. And you had all these people in these executive roles, laying off thousands and thousands of people at their organizations. And if I think back to that book, Leaders Eat Last, that book really centered around trust in communities. And what was happening in the situation was people were leaving, or people were losing their jobs. And they were losing their jobs, and these executives that were making these decisions, they ended up getting bonuses. It just didn't make sense to me. So I guess the whole idea behind being in an authority role doesn't necessarily make you a leader. And I mean, there's certainly, a difference between the two. So I guess those are really some things that sparked that. And then over the years, I did a master's degree, and through that, there were some different courses that I had taken on leadership, and some of the different things that I had learned about, one of them being self-leadership. And we talk about that here internally, becoming masters of our craft, becoming experts, being disciplined to go ahead and understand the details. We talk about that internally too, the devil's in the details. So you really have to spend the time to understand what you're doing so you can then get better at what you're doing. So self-leadership is certainly an interesting topic when it comes to leadership, resonant leadership, authentic leadership. We talked about this too, the whole idea behind leadership in terms of, are people born naturally with those charismatic traits that help them become great leaders, or is it something that can be taught? And I think that's very interesting too, in the sense that how do you quantify leadership to the point where you can then teach it to somebody? I don't know, it's very interesting because I don't think you can. I think it's immersive. I think you have to experience it and go through it. So those are, I guess, some of the ideas that I've been studying and reading about and learning about from different thought leaders as it comes to leadership. So, yeah.
So it resonated with you by being situationally aware of what was going around you in your environments, and knowing that it didn't fit with your values. You knew people were not being treated as well as they could. It led you to seek out your own self-study. The next question I'm asking goes about Daniel Goleman's article on what makes a leader. We had spoke about that last time in our conversation on leadership. And actually, Tuba posted that on October 1st. That article you can find on our Facebook page on what makes a leader. And there's 5 components that he believes incorporates emotional intelligence, which is needed for leadership. And I'm going to try to remember them. Self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, and social skill. And is there one that really resonates with you?
Well, and I think that's really where we had explored our interest in leadership together, was based around Goleman's theory on emotional intelligence. Certainly that's a big component to, I think, any leader is just being aware of the situation. I don't think there's any one in particular that resonates with me. I think I just like how it all works together. I think it's very cohesive. The first two, self-awareness and self-regulation, I mean, that's very internal. You have to be aware of your situation, aware of your feelings, your thoughts. I mean, we've all had conversations that go sideways, and it usually starts with you. So that internal aspect, I think, is good. And then on the other side of the last two, the empathy and social skills, so just putting yourself in other people's shoes and understanding their perspective on the matter at hand. And I think if we take the time, and it doesn't even have to happen in that conversation, sometimes even afterwards you can reflect on the conversations that you've had with people and go back after and say, maybe when we were having this discussion, I didn't necessarily take it from your perspective, but after doing so, this is what I've come to. So I think that external component is very interesting when it comes to Goleman's theory. But I think what pulls it all together is the motivation. I mean, any sort of change, any sort of worthwhile endeavor requires some sort of motivation, which is at the center, I think, of Goleman's theory. And, again, it starts with you thinking about where you're coming from and making sure that you are emotionally regulated, but also thinking about the other person. And I think once you have an understanding of the two, then you can find that common ground to then find the motivation to then see through the change that you are probably both after. So I really like that. And I think, personally, I value win-win situations. I mean, there's a lot of trade-offs that end up happening in decisions that you make. That's how it goes sometimes. But anytime a win-win situation presents itself, we should latch on and try to see that way forward. I think about the proverb of, if you want to go quickly, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. I think that ties in nicely here into what Goleman's doing, because any sort of lasting change, any sort of lasting endeavor doesn't involve one person, it involves a group of people. So we have to be aware of that, and I think that's why Goleman's theory rings so true to me. Is I believe that people, we're better when we go at it together, and it's lasting, right? You remove the person who's trying to push through something. From a change perspective, you remove that one person, it may not see the light of day, but if everybody's bought in and everybody's working towards that common goal, then it's just not one person, right? It's the group that'll see it through, and I think that's important when it comes to lasting change. That'll anchor it down.
You make a really good point, Owen. By intertwining the 5 components of Goleman's emotional intelligence, you are more apt to have a win-win situation, be open to new perspective, and then that gives you the common ground to move forward towards change. The next question has to do, and I will say that you do have wisdom to share. Knowledge comes from reading textbook, but wisdom comes from putting it into action.
Right, practice.
So how has your self-practice helped you in your career at Dovico for the past 12 years?
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure that the roles that I take on really changes my perspective. I think every role requires, actually every situation requires different types of leadership. I don't think my role has really changed my perspective. I think, I guess I'll go back to just the way that I approach it. I think about a vision where I think we should be, and I think about the people that I'm involved with whenever I try to make something happen. And just, I guess, communicating that vision and just trying to minimize any sort of miscommunication or misperception that could stem from any sort of change, because we all love change, right? So if we try to remove those misconceptions, miscommunication, misperceptions from the equation through good communication, then you can start getting to the point where we can then all start moving in the right direction. I talk about it. I don't care about being right. I want to get it right. But again, that involves the other people that we're trying to move forward with to try to get that change put in place. So I think just the communication aspect of it is big, and just having the right vision and being willing to listen to other people's input on that vision, I think is big too, right? Because, it's not your way or the highway. That's just not how it works. At least in my world, it's not. You need to understand the perspectives of the others that are going to be involved with you.
And I think from what you were saying that you have become a very humble leader. When you look at communication is 99% of everything, and by taking the time to work out those misconceptions, different perspectives, the miscommunication, and getting to the core of the issue and taking everybody else's ideas into account, that's part of being humble and part of being a leader.
Yeah, and I mean, there's certain situations, times of crisis, it's hard to get perspective, and you shouldn't look for perspective from everybody. But I think you should always come back to the decisions that were made, and I think that's the big thing, is just the communication around decisions that you've made. I think you have to be willing at that moment to convey, well, this is what was happening at the time, this is why I made the decisions that were made, and then being open to having the discussions around that, because, again, misconceptions or misperception, if you're not willing to have that communication, then people are going to form their own opinions, and you may lose all credibility going forward. So again, there's certain situations where you have to just go ahead and make the decision, but I think you should always come back and be willing to have that conversation after the fact to discuss what was happening.
The importance in reflection and follow-up, and that's where the compassion for the human relationship does come in.
Yeah, well, I talked about win-win situations earlier. I mean, you should always be thinking about, trying to find those win-win situations. You shouldn't try to win at all costs, and especially if you value the relationship on the other end. The other person feels that, and you don't want to build your wins on other people's backs. You definitely don't want that.
People always remember how you made them feel.
Yeah,
absolutely. The next question, Owen, has to do with being a parent and taking what you have learned about leadership and finding those moments with your son. You do have a son who's going into his young teens right now.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you find those teaching moments, or what do you convey to him about leadership?
I go back to conversations I've had with people here about integrity, and I mean, every decision you make is a test of that integrity. And I mean, that's probably a big concept for a preteen to grasp. But I think you can, as a parent, think about every moment, and maybe you and I probably spend too much time on the negative stuff he does. We should probably spend a little bit more time on the positives. But just but breaking down, the decisions that they've made in their situations, and just trying to get them to understand perspective, I think is big. And I spend a lot of time with Jordan just trying to understand his his decision-making process, his thought process, and I try to introduce other perspectives, I guess. Mm-hmm. So it's there's no one right answer for this. There's no silver bullet for this. It's a constant thing. But we always go back to, do you think you made the right decision in that situation? And if you did, why? If you didn't, what can you do better next time? So it's just learning opportunities, I think.
You're setting him up so that he has emotional responses, not reactions, which will take him very far, absolutely. The last question, Owen, we talked about, are there good leaders, bad leaders, or is it just choosing to become a leader? What are your thoughts? There's no right or wrong answer. It's one of those food for thought questions.
Well, we've all experienced good leadership, and we've all experienced bad leadership. It's hard to quantify. Again, we know those traits when we see them, but again, how do you quantify that? And I think that's hard. I think every situation requires a certain type of leader. And I mean, there are different types of leadership, as we all know. But I don't know. It really is hard to answer. Again, we've all experienced good leaders and seen good leaders in action, and I think we should all try to aspire a little bit towards that, and be mindful of how you felt in those moments where you had that bad leadership in front of you, and just understand why that situation was the way it was. So if you ever find yourself in that situation, you can go ahead and maybe do the opposite.
and know that you have a choice. And that's just it. There's positions that are called leadership positions, but the position doesn't make the person a leader.
And I think that goes back to that book by Simon Sinek, Leaders Eat Last, is just because you've been given a role and you've got the political capital to make decisions, it doesn't necessarily mean you are a leader. And I think that was really the piece of the book that resonated with me. The whole idea behind trust within a social setting. This goes back to tens of thousands of years where tribes are formed and people look to others to help make sure the group stays intact. And if the leader of the group is acting in a self-interested manner, then trust is lost, and it really impacts the group. And again, getting back to the recession and the timing in which I read that book, you could see that happening plain as day. So it was, I guess, a little bit of a spark for me at the time.
Thank you very much, Owen. Just to have a recap, by being situationally aware of what was happening within your environment, that led you on a path of self-discovery, and that you were able to utilize what was important to you in your values and work knowing that you wanted to work in passion and fulfillment and work those components of Daniel Goleman's model. And that led you to be a teacher for your son. And teaching your son about integrity is so powerful at a young age. It just sets him up to be able to build those networking relationships he needs to survive in the adult world today, as well as be true to his own values and virtues, and understanding that anybody can take the time to develop leadership skills in any position they're in, and it doesn't necessarily need to be called a leadership position.
That's a great summary of it, I think. Yeah, absolutely. It's all about the learning, all about taking what you learn and then trying to apply it, trying to find the right situations to apply it. And I think sharing it is big, right? It's not just about trying to learn it for yourself and keeping it to yourself. I think sharing it is big. And again, I don't think I have wisdom. I don't think, I obviously don't know everything there is to know about this, but I love sharing it, and I love hearing other people's perspectives. So anybody want to have the discussion, certainly.
I think a great takeaway would be if everybody today could put the word leader in one conversation that they're having today and just see where that leads. And I think it's very appropriate, Owen, to close our interview with a high five.
Awesome.
In recognition for your wisdom you bring to Dovico and your self-accountability that you are showing. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And you can check out, again, the Daniel Goleman's article on what makes a leader back on October 1st on our Tuba Facebook page. The rest of the month of November is going to be dedicated to the behavioral trait of trust in a workplace. And in 2 weeks' time, I'm going to have Jody here in the hot seat with me.
Ooh.
I look forward to it, yes. And I hand it back over to Eve. If there's anything else?
Well,
Do you have notes with what was just said?
Putting you on the spot.
Thoughts,
wow.
yeah.
I know I'm not going to do planks before doing an interview. It took my breath away.
So many things to say. Wow, what a great interview. It was like I'm honored to be part of your group, I guess, and learned so much today. And one of the things that resonated with your discussion is that leadership is just another job in a way. It's another role. It's not better than another person's role. It comes with responsibility, and it comes with moving the community together towards a certain goal, right? And if you take this as a more than anybody else role, then you're not going to succeed. It has to be towards the community. So thank you very much for that inspiring discussion. I loved it. Let's do it again. So I'm looking forward to your discussion with Jody on trust. I love the little takeaway too. I'm going to take that on. Putting leadership in something in the conversation today. So thank you so much. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll tune in next week.
We just want to wish V is getting married.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
So yes.
We're not going to have yoga for next
So
week.
no yoga. She doesn't do yoga in her
Not for
family.
next week.
What's up with that?
Maybe I can ask her.
Yeah, so yeah, well, have
You can
fun,
Skype
V. We'll
her
miss
in.
you.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
And we have JD and Jamie away this week as well. They're doing some customer experience
Right.
type training, some journey mapping out in San
Excellent.
Francisco.
Yeah,
So,
San Francisco.
yeah.
Wow.
Lovely.
Cool.
so good luck, guys.
Yeah,
Enjoy.
guys. All right,
That's it.
that's it.
Happy
All right, guys.
Monday.
Happy
Bye.
Monday.